This is the podcast between an old school mentor and a digital mentee on managing and/or working with people, navigating a career, growing profits, and not killing your coworkers along the way. Now let's join the consultant, Haydn Shaw, and the millennial who fixes Haydn's iPhone, Seth Tower Hurd.
This is the consultant and the millennial. My name is Seth Tower Hurd. I run a company called Digital Profit Farm, and we do websites and SEO that make you money, social media management that makes you money, and podcasting that reaches about 75,000 people a month and makes you money. He's Haydn Shaw. He's helped over 30,000 managers with their people and process issues, and apparently has some medals from the government or something for heroism of management consulting hanging behind him. Or what are those for exactly?
They're from '99, Seth. I'm old. Back when General Costello was, he was a 3-star general. I did some things for him and for his team on leadership development.
Okay.
In '99.
I'm going to get this out of the way early. You can't move around that much, man. You got to get a little closer to the mic again.
I'll get the mic closer to me.
There we go. All right, bad news. This topic was brought on by the fact that MoviePass has got to be one of the worst companies at this that we've probably seen in the last 10 years. So this is a company that, if you're not familiar with them, it's $10 a month, unlimited movies, and that's how it worked for about the first 6 to 7 months. And then they ran out of money because, well, it's $10 a month for unlimited movies. So this is undoubtedly going to go out of business. I still have it because of the fact that I haven't figured out how to freaking cancel the thing. I keep canceling it in the app, and all it does is just keep renewing my subscription. So that remains to be seen, but let me just run through a little bit of the turmoil here, okay? So they've changed their plan approximately 5 times. So it used to be you could just go to any movie. They've changed their plan approximately 5 times over the summer, including you had to upload your tickets when you went to a movie, or your service could be canceled, which is kind of crazy. They said they were cutting down on fraud. I don't really know of an aftermarket or a black market for movie tickets because you can always just go to the next showing, right? They then said that you couldn't see certain movies at certain times, and then they scaled it back to where you could see, like, they'd only offer like 2 movies a day, and if it was a big movie, they'd only offer like 1 p.m. and 10 p.m. So, if it's a really long flick like Mission Impossible, you're not going to get out until like 1:30 in the morning. By the time you factor in the previews and, a 2.5-hour movie. And
that would be called Old Man Impossible.
Yes, we can do that. Then they changed their pricing. Then they changed their pricing back. So it went from $10 to $15, back down to $10. And I'm not even sure how it works now because I got logged out and I can't log back in. And I'm not a person who loses my passwords because of the fact that I use a password manager. So this actually isn't my fault. And actually, competition has risen up around them. AMC Theaters is now doing $20 a month for like 12 movies a month or something like that. So their bad idea probably will spur some good ideas that actually work. And it's this whole thing has been kind of pockmarked with all these emails they send out saying, oh, well, we're learning alongside you, and we're just trying to make the experience better. No, you're not. You have an impossible product to sustain, and you're not making it better. You're obviously trying to keep this thing alive, which I understand. They had to borrow money just to stay open one week. They had to borrow $6 million to keep from closing their doors. So that is about as bad as I've ever seen any bad news handled, and I've been continually frustrated with it over the course of this summer. And again,
how many months has this been going on since they literally ran out of money because people saw more movies than they anticipated?
Yeah, they ran out of money last month. So that was pretty exciting.
I'm sorry, when did they start changing all this?
They started changing it, I think, in May. So May, June, July, May. August. Yeah.
That's when my son started complaining about it.
Yeah. So, this is a company that, the stock's down to 24 cents or something like that at one point. I don't know if it's exactly there right now, although it could be lower. I guess when they talk about penny stocks, that's not usually a literal term, but in this case, it might wind up being
hate to break the buck.
A literal penny. Yes, a literal penny. So, but this is beyond the fact that it's a terrible, it's a company that had a great idea that just couldn't execute on it. I've never seen somebody blame their customers as much. I don't think I've ever seen somebody that just couldn't just say, hey, we're sorry, we're fixing it. It's complicated by the fact that there probably is no fixing it, right? But yeah.
So let's start there. I mean, Seth, you know movies much better than I do. Why can't they fix it?
Why can't they fix it?
Why can't they fix it?
Oh, because it's impossible. They are.
That would be a good explanation. A little deeper than impossible.
Okay, so let me do this. They actually have to pay full price for the tickets of the movie ticket to the studio or the theater. So you go to your local theater and the tickets should be $15. You pay them $10 a month. They have to reimburse for $15. What they were trying to do is make money other ways, like off of cuts of concessions and selling research back to movie studios, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that stuff worked out. There are other streams of revenue. So then they also assumed that you wouldn't actually see that many movies, kind of like gym memberships work, because people sign up for gym memberships and don't actually go. Well, what winds up happening, the gym membership is hard. The movie going experience is pretty dang easy, and so people
sitting on your butt versus sweating. Yeah, somebody missed that one.
Yes, so the consumption has gone up like every single month. People who get MoviePass use it more and more and more. They were thinking people would see like 2 movies a month, and people are seeing like 5+. I mean, including me. It's just broken their back. I don't know why they haven't just closed down their doors as a company completely, because there's no saving this. But the continual, there were 2 to 3 emails a week some weeks explaining another change, taking a change back. Their timid attitude and their uncertainty is like nothing. It's not hyperbole to say it's like nothing I've ever seen in any company, period.
That's not well done.
Yeah. So bad news, one of the things you got to do with bad news, I would say, to kind of start this topic, is you can't keep going back to it. You got to decide what you're going to say, and you got to say that thing.
Well, in their case, I think it's a great example, and it's an extreme example, because they probably have nothing but an ever descending set of bad news. So in many ways, they're at probably level 3 of Dante's 7 levels of hell, and they probably still have 4 to go. And they're trying to spin being on level 3 of hell, and it's not working. People see right through it. That when they say stuff like it's a user experience, it really isn't. Your business model probably isn't salvageable. And so we were learning right alongside you was a better attempt, but how frustrating is it to have a company learning alongside you? Yeah. Better is, hey, we have to pay full price, and people are seeing a lot more movies than we'd anticipated, and we're trying to figure out how to keep it afloat.
Yeah.
The truth, in this case, would have set them free.
Yeah, and there was a lot of language around we're changing the movie-going experience. Theater attendance is up a lot this year. Blah 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 blah. We're making the movie world better because more people are going to movies, but also we're taking away what we promised you. And so them trying to actually paint good news actually just infuriated me more.
Well, that's right. Now, some people, if you've been following the podcast, you know that Seth is kind of low on good news. It's not that you don't like good news. You don't like a positive glaze. You just rather have the rock, the piece of dirt, actually the piece of crap be the dog pile. Don't varnish it. Don't put a plaque on it. Don't add a accessory caption so that it has a nicer spin to it. Just say it out.
Well, no, but Haydn, you just for the record though, you did say that that's the way people want to get bad news at work, right? They don't want the love sandwich anymore. People just want to be told, "Hey, you're not doing a good job," and then after that, you can talk about how to fix it.
What I said against me when I'm old and can't remember. I can't stay up late for Mission Impossible at 10:30, and I don't remember what I have for lunch.
Yeah. Okay. So it doesn't work on individuals. And it may be that's kind of the changing cultural norm, that people just want to get they just want to go ahead and get punched in the face. And the thing is like, if they just would have said it, and I would have had an option on what to do earlier, if they just would have said, hey, we're going to change, so we're either going to raise our prices, or we are going to go ahead and it's going to be limited from here on out, and there was just one change, they probably would have been okay, because then I had a binary decision. What happens when you just kind of keep trickling down bad news and you can't be straight with it is it forces me as the consumer or as the employee, if this is an internal thing going on, it forces me to emotionally keep revisiting this issue and then maybe get my hopes back up only to be dashed again.
You end up making and eventually you have to pick a binary decision point. You finally have enough, this drags on enough where you're like, okay, this is binary for me. And you've tried to cancel out and you can't, which is just a bizarre user experience. I've tried repeatedly to cancel you and you won't let me, or your systems are so jacked up, or everybody's trying to cancel, and so they can't sustain it.
And can I jump in right there real quick, Haydn?
Yeah.
So one of the things that everybody talks about, like business is like the 1950s Main Street, small town America again, because the consumer's complaint can be heard. That's not true when everybody's yelling about the same issue. Your individual complaint's not going to be heard. So it used to be that you think about like airlines in the 90s, they could do whatever they wanted to you. Then they had to at least get moderately nicer, right? Moderately, right. And then they, have had some snafus, like beating that doctor up so bad. What's that? Yeah. Well, what happens is if everybody hates a product and it's a digital product, if we're all yelling about the same thing, I mean, if you just search the hashtag MoviePass on Twitter, it's nothing but complaints. So my voice is not going to add anything to those complaints. Kind of like the Mayweather-McGregor pay-per-view fight on Showtime last year. Didn't work until about the second round, and I missed all the opening fights. I had a bunch of people over. It was, kind of embarrassing and frustrating. I'm still waiting on my $100 back, which I was supposed to get back, and they said they're going to give it back to me. They probably never will, because I'm one of maybe a few 100,000 people that have the same issue.
Right.
Okay. So I just wanted to point out that, it's a different standard these days. So
when people talk about, let's talk about that for a moment. When people talk about being Mayberry again, if you got a business model that works, it could be Mayberry. If I grew up in a town about the size, a little bigger than Mayberry, and I remember a guy complaining. I remember a guy my age complaining in college that it's just funny that people won't support a local business. I was just thinking about this the other week. People won't support a local business anymore. No, your father ran a rundown skating rink, and skating fell out of favor, and there weren't enough people to go skating on a regular basis. It's a town of 15,000.
Yeah.
Then they started a pie shop, which, I love pie, so I, for some reason, was thinking about that last week. And it's like, I can't believe people supported it. Well, it was really expensive pie, and it was good at first, and then you really cheapened it, and then people thought it wasn't good. So it was expensive and good, and then it was expensive and not as good. Mm-hmm. And so bottom line is, if your business model is bad, you don't really survive no matter what it is. And in this case, their business model is bad. And when you got really bad news to say, then all you can say is, hey, here's where we're at. Now, Netflix, my guess is Netflix is what they're trying to copy. If I were making a guess, my guess is, because Netflix had a model that didn't work. Yeah. So they started streaming. They were stunned by how many people switched from renting videos through the mail, like they started out as, to doing streaming. And they ran through all their contracts much faster than they anticipated. And so in order to do new contracts, they had to pay a lot more. So they suddenly raised everybody's prices and said, you got to pick one or the other. You can either have DVDs or you can do streaming. Well, most of us, a lot of people don't even remember Netflix and DVDs.
I do. I'm kind of an early adopter on all things tech. So, yeah, I totally remember it.
Movie and tech. So, of course. Well, Netflix, if you remember the weekend that Netflix announced the change, there was huge hullabaloo. Everybody, even national news, was reporting on it. And within about 2 weeks, it all died down because people decided, am I going to pay back then $7 a month for Netflix or not? And they were able to get a couple more deals done, and before they had their own shows and their own stuff in any kind of magnitude, people are like, yeah, okay, I can't live without Netflix, even if they don't have anything.
Yeah.
As much as I would like. And so people paid up. It was fussy.
Yeah.
People fussed about it. There were complaints about it. But people realized, man, they're out of money. Their business model won't work. And so within a month, people kind of moved on. They still complained for 6 months, but it moved on. And my guess is they're hoping for that reaction, but they don't have a business model that'll work.
Yeah, well, and they kept fidgeting with it. So Netflix made the announcement, and then that was it. I would say that I went through something pretty bad with another company called Samsung. I got the Note 7. The Note 7s were exploding.
Oh, yeah.
I went through 2 or 3 replacement Note 7s before they finally let me go ahead and get a different kind of phone. I was facing a flight where I couldn't take my phone. What's that? You what?
I got a Note 8, so I was back in. It hasn't burned up once. I love Samsung.
Yeah. So I was extremely frustrated. I felt like I was spending my entire life at the store, basically. I'm just like, oh, this is all I do is just go in and get new phones. It's interrupting my business travel. This is extremely frustrating. I hate Samsung. People were saying Samsung would go away forever. That's ridiculous. I mean, Samsung makes washers and refrigerators and, phones and televisions and sound bars. I mean, they're a huge company. And even I, 2 years later, after saying these are the worst things ever, I wanted to get the Note 9, but we have Apple Watches, and Amanda would not go away from the Apple Watch kind of system. And they do make terrible watches for women. I mean, they basically said, as a company, we don't want women wearing our watches. And I do love the watch for the fitness aspects. So we're back on iPhones. But anyway, I hated them more than anything, and I couldn't even hold it for 2 years. So if you give your bad news and then you come back and you make up for it by being a good company, there's something to be said there.
Yeah, Samsung would have done better by just admitting it right up front. Apple messed it up. I had the iPhone 4, and you remember AntennaGate. And that was one of the times Apple didn't do it well.
Yep.
And Steve Jobs' answer was, well, just hold it differently. Who uses their phone for phone calls anyway? And, that was probably the wrong answer. And, okay, fine, we'll give everybody a free bumper guard so they don't have the trouble.
Yeah.
They just needed to say, yeah, we didn't anticipate people holding it there. And, if you can't reposition your hand, then you're probably going to have to get a case. And they could have said that. Instead, he said some dumb things, and then they had to provide everybody bumpers that they couldn't manufacture fast enough. Okay,
let's one more kind of flub here, and I think that the common theme here, there's 2 common themes. Number 1 is don't sugarcoat it and have a plan on what you're going to say, and number 2 is stick to what you have to say after that, unless you say something so epically stupid. So the Xbox One was originally video game system was originally going to have to go on the internet every day,
like new gubernatorial candidates in Florida. If you say something epically stupid, it's just time to say, wow, that was epically stupid.
What did the gubernatorial candidate say? I forgot.
Well, his Democratic challenger is black, and he made some kind of it up.
Yeah. That was
first you shoot yourself, and then you apologize, and then I don't know, how do you recover from that?
Yeah, I don't know either. I think it was a writer for ESPN about Jeremy Lin, the NBA point guard, one of the few notable Asians in the NBA and ever. You wind up reusing a lot of headlines when you're writing about sports, and so one of the headlines that wound up getting reused in regards to Jeremy Lin performance, where they were praising him, was a chink in the armor, which of course chink is a slang for Asian people. And the guy didn't even mean to do it. He wasn't thinking about it. He showed 10 other times where he'd use the exact same headline, because you can recycle those, and he still wound up losing his job. So unfortunately, sometimes that's just how it goes down. The last one, though, when it comes to, either just blowing smoke in the face of the customer or blaming the customer, and then I want to shift internally, is Xbox One. Originally, you were going to have to go online every day for it to check in or whatever, and that was stupid because not everybody has reliable internet. Some people live in rural America where that's not going to be possible, and a lot of soldiers overseas really like the Xbox. People play Xbox on submarines that are underwater for months, and they're not going to be able to use it anymore. And the vice president for Xbox said, well, we have a product for people like that. Tell them to get our old system. So he said to soldiers who were actively at war, we don't care if you buy our product, basically heck with you. Really, really bad. And I mean, that cost him his job. So there might have been technologically a reason why they couldn't have fixed it. But, we would have said, hey, I guess my take would have been, hey, we're so sorry, we support our military. Unfortunately, that's just the way the system works. That would have played way differently than like, well, who cares? We don't want you to have this anyway.
No, it is kinder, gentler Microsoft in new leadership now, and so that's one of the things they had to work on was that was not just tone deaf; it was dumb.
Yeah.
And we've given 3 examples of very, very successful technological companies who have all made major missteps and basically blamed it on the user for wanting something that they decided they weren't going to provide.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and talk about delivering bad news internally, though. Can we kind of make the shift to internal?
Yeah, let me talk about this. In many ways, Netflix handled it the best. Netflix didn't make a big deal of their business model didn't work anymore. They let the press do that. They released some things to the press, and Netflix was popular enough. People used it enough that the press made a big deal about how Netflix is running out. Anybody who had Netflix could see news feeds on that, and so they let the press do the negative work, and then they simply responded to it, let out a press release, and took their lumps and went on with it. Whereas, in this case, people they don't have an answer to people who can't see movies. You can go at 1 and you can go at 10 is not an answer. You just say I'm sorry, but then again, if they give people the opportunity to opt out, everybody's going to opt out. So. Yeah.
Yeah, the only way to keep customers is to not allow them to quit, which is where they're at with me. So that's pretty fantastic. Okay, so much of this parallels things internally. So turn the corner there, Seth. So let's turn the corner to let's start with firing someone. Okay, I always have felt very uncomfortable when I've been with the company and they send out an email to everybody with the person's name in the subject line, and then the message says is no longer with the company. I don't know how you tell the rest of the staff you fired somebody, but making it sound like they weren't fired is awkward when everybody knows they were fired. And saying that via email is, and I don't know what the good way is, but that's bad.
HR law says that there are some things in a person's file that you can't go into. And that's why most companies, they err on the side of safety by not saying they're fired, in case that person were to come back and say, hey, we didn't agree that you could say I was fired. Now, I mean, it's in the person's, and so it's privacy and employee privacy and what they could come back and take action.
Okay, well, let me spin it a different way, Haydn, okay? So there could be a legal element there for sure. Let me spin it a different way. This happened to me. I'm working on something that I put a ton of work into with another person. I get an email, blah, 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 is no longer with the company. My workload just doubled. Somebody could have at least flipped and told me that in person, that my life's about to get harder for the next 6 weeks because this other person's not there to back me up.
You know what? I don't think there's any way to justify or explain other than a miss. It was just a miss.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes the notice has to go out because people are like, well, we don't want to tell anybody ahead of time. We want to get the right, we want to control the message. Okay, great. Then get to the people who are going to be impacted by it and have a conversation right away, or don't fire them that day, or take your lumps. Here's the worst case scenario. This person, they decide they're going to fire him. They call them in. There's 4 projects the person's on. 2 of those people are not available to contact the other employees, and you got to write them instead. Sometimes that's unavoidable if they've stolen something, if you're worried they're going to take something. I've worked with clients where they've had an employee who they thought was going to steal stuff. And so they needed to catch him by surprise, and as a result, it kind of messed over a couple of people who were working with them who were like, what? And so, but unless there was some real extenuating circumstances like that, it's a miss to just assume. I know of a company that hired some people who would actually take work away from somebody and didn't even tell them. And then you're like,
like you're off the project type of thing.
No, you're on the project. They're just, there's a limited number. It'd be like hiring a graphics designer And it'd be like you hiring 3 more contractors and not telling you, and your current contractor's finding it out.
Oh, it's like I was going to pay you for 30 hours total for this project. Now I'm going to pay you for 10 because I got some more people.
Yeah, we found somebody else to help with it. You had some trouble with some availability or whatever. And they didn't tell the person, hey, this person's in the project or in the area and they're like, oh, well, I didn't think it mattered because little heads up, stuff like that leaves a mark. And so, many organizations are overled and undermanaged. They just don't think about the basic blocking and tackling of management enough. And then they mess over their folks. Yeah. And while there's sometimes people need to be like, hey, need to understand there's stuff going on we can't do. Many of times it was just a bad management move.
Yeah. If we can extend that out, mass layoffs. Talking through that, you've been through a bunch of reduction in force stuff with company. I mean, not you've been laid off a bunch of times. You've been through a bunch of reduction in force stuff with companies, right?
I've had the good fortune of not being laid off. What I've had happen, because I worked for Frank and Covey for decades. What I have had happen is Frank and Covey, even though people are full time, they're paid by the day, and so when the economy got bad, folks just didn't have as much work, and so they didn't say to you, "Hey, we're going to let people go," because it wasn't a high cost for them to keep people on. But what in essence happened is your income dropped by 30%. And so, that was bad news. Hey, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle it? And, so I've not had a reduction in force, but in organizations that do that, there's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it. And if you want to see something to refer to, so if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm going to have to do this. In the book Primal Leadership, now it's, once again, I've said it before on this show, it's one of the things when we looked at, what are your favorite books on something. Primal Leadership is one of my favorite books on emotional intelligence and leadership. And they tell a story of a newsroom that had to lay off reporters. And they tell a story of how a manager did it in a way that just made everybody mad, and how somebody else came in with the team and delivered it in a way, and they knew they were frustrated, but it made them feel like what they were doing mattered. It's just the circumstances here made it impossible to keep everybody. And suddenly, it was just a difference between good emotional intelligence and dumb communication. And so,
can I throw an example in there? Going back to the movie Braveheart. The movie Braveheart is about people who are going to die horrifically in a war they're probably going to lose. And, Scotland won their independence there, and that only lasted for about 14 years. And they fell again, and they got it back again. I mean, they kind of had been in and out of the clutches of Britain a bunch of times. But the movie Braveheart works because one guy talks a bunch of people into dying for something that actually doesn't wind up lasting anyway. But my gosh, it's one of the greatest scenes ever, right? They can take our lives, they can never take our freedom stuff. All that is good management.
Well, it's emotional intelligence, and so even if you're not as good at communicating and inspiring people, and some people that's just not, you go to StrengthsFinder, as you recommended many times, that's not where your strengths are going to be. Anybody can up their game in emotional intelligence if they just look at what works better in these kind of situations. And so if you want to find something in print to go back and refer to, go to Primal Leadership and look up newspapers in the index. Okay. And it'll give you a great before and after in terms of how to handle it. But 3 things that a person should look at there. The first one is the bad news is the bad news, and the bad news comes from either a change in circumstance or some dumb decisions that we've made. So name the bad news. Name the monster under the bed. Say what's going on. If it's external environment, as it was in the news business, then just say. We all know that news is under stress. We don't make as much money. We don't sell as much advertising. People aren't buying classified ads when they got a couch to sell, and so they're going on Craigslist for free. So revenue's down. Done. Or if you've made a mistake, we thought the market was going to do this, so we doubled down and it did that. We're in an impossible situation. It was partly the market and partly our bad decision. Or if it's just somebody before you made a really bad decision, it was, we called it wrong. Some of you are telling us we shouldn't do this. We did it anyway, and it was a bad call. And I know it impacts not only people in leadership, but it impacts incomes and families of people who've done the work, many of them who thought we were making the wrong call. Just say it.
Yeah, let's kind of land the plane on this topic, and a lot of that seems to have come back to emotional intelligence, but it also seems like there's also a pretty good element of this in having a plan on how you're going to do something, and then not just kind of emotionally keep going back and ripping the Band-Aid off over and over and over again every time the wound starts to heal.
So that would be the second thing internally. Figure out what you're going to do, and then when you change it because you discover it's not working, then you can say, here was our plan, and now we need to make an adjustment to it because it's not working.
Yeah.
What you don't keep saying is, well, you guys are doing it wrong and we have to protect against fraud. Really? Somebody's using this pass and handing off tickets to their sister-in-law who doesn't have it? How? How is this happening?
Yeah. Basically, I mean, it's not. It was just their excuse. They were trying to get less people using the... by the way, if you're watching on Facebook Live...
Do not lie internally or externally, because that's what will get you in Mayberry. The lying will get you in Mayberry. Don't have a good business model or lie, and you're hated.
Yeah. Let's talk about people who are change averse, because you talk a lot about change management. Bad news is change management. I can think of one time when I resigned from a job when I had a coworker who was extremely upset. I would say angry that I resigned because it screwed up their life, that I resigned from a job that I didn't like anyway.
What screwed up their life?
No.
Other than, you're just so dang cute. What screwed up their life?
That it was change. It was change. They liked the way things were, and I'm like, what are you doing? But, bad news is like, because I'm a person that just kind of water rolls off my back. I'll go in, I'll figure it out, I'll find another way to do it. I kind of like blowing stuff up. The times that I have been through a couple of layoffs in my life, I was like, whatever. I mean, it's, not that I wasn't freaked out, but it's like, I guess that's done. I guess I'll go do something else now. At one point when I went through a pretty big mass layoff of, like 30 plus people, something like that, I'd figured it out the night before. I walked in, they started to say something. I said, I know what's going on. And then they said, okay. And I said, I want to buy my laptop, and I want to know if I have insurance through the end of the month or how long I have my insurance for. And they told me that, and they said, you can work for the next 3 weeks, or you can go now, and, there will be a thank you reception at this time. And I said, I'm not coming to reception. None of you will ever see me again. Nothing personal, but thanks, I'm out. I walked up, I pulled the stuff off I pulled my laptop cord, walked out, and had a friend bring me the rest of my stuff off my desk. Not because I was angry, just because whatever, I was moving on in my life, I didn't say goodbye to anybody, I just walked out. I am the epitome of somebody who's not change averse. You have somebody that's change averse, even when other people leave or it's bad news, their role's going to change, whatever. They're more likely to just be upset, not necessarily about the news, but about the change. So what does that look like in change management?
That's right. We talked about 6 change reactions in a past episode of this. And so people who are, you like change, you are actually, in many situations, you would be what I call an enthusiast, a person that enjoys change. And even if nothing's changing, you'll find something to change.
Hey, the optimist who likes conflict says being laid off is just a good opportunity for me to tell people I've never liked exactly what I think of them.
Yes, once again, there are many things I don't recommend, and that would be a temptation I would recommend. On the other hand, you got people on the whole other side of the spectrum who have a negative polarity toward change. And some of them are analytical by nature, and they want to know the exact plan and how all the details line up. The fact that you're this frustrated with that company because they don't even have a plan and keep pretending like they do. For you, it's not like you're a person that has to have everything spelled out in 17 pages. You're like, well, what are you going to do? What's your basic business model? Whereas there are some people who want to know all the answers. They're always going to be frustrated when there's bad news. And then there are people who get really emotional about change, like the person that you work with, and they're, I call those folks resistors because they emotionally resist change rather than think their way through it. And you got to handle both of those differently. Bottom line is, you state the changes, and like Netflix, you let the analytical folks fuss over how the future stinks and why can't it be a lot cheaper and you get both DVDs and streaming? Why do you have to pay double? Blah blah blah. And you let them complain about it, and eventually they adjust or they don't. Just because Seth, they got a binary choice, to quote you. Like, stay or go. Whereas the folks that are resistors, that are emotional about change and the way they process their negative response to change, the negative polarity toward change, they're going to be on Twitter. You can engage with them. Mainly you have to listen to them and go, I know, sometimes that's hard. Or sometimes organizations just ignore them because they keep it stirred up, but eventually they die down. And internally, all you can do is comfort them. You cannot logically respond to an emotional reaction.
Yeah. Going back to the, that's a good line. There, you cannot logically respond to an emotional reaction. So if somebody's really emotional, do you just kind of have to let them sit for a while?
You often you do. Often you do.
How many times
have you had somebody at work who was about to cry? And sometimes the kindest, most empathic thing you can do is look away and let them get through whatever emotion they're having and then come back to you. And one of the reasons that I help organizations in some really hard situations is that I don't mind when people cry. And so, and it sounds really stereotypical, so I'm just going to lay that out there. But a lot of men find it incredibly uncomfortable when women cry.
Yeah.
And I don't. I'm like, oh, here's a tissue. And with one client, they're like, we could never do this because she would always start crying. Uh-huh. And I don't think she was gaming them. I thought it just made her cry, and they just didn't know what to do. And I finally let her cry for a half hour, and she finally came to the conclusion of, I probably ought to quit, shouldn't I? Huh. Was that what you think will be best for you and your family? Yeah. It's really hard for you. The point of it is, maybe you look away and maybe you just let the other person emote in front of you and then let them sort it out. Because you don't have any other answer than the answer. We cannot stay in business if we let you have DVDs and streaming, so you're going to have to pay a monthly charge for streaming. Really? Yeah. Well, I hate that. That's not fair. That's not what you agreed to. Yeah, I know. It is disappointing. And you just focus on the emotions, because if you provide logic when somebody else is having an emotional response to it, they just get more emotional. All you can do is hold their hand. All you can do is give them a tissue. All you can do is let them vent. And sometimes you just got to give them a couple of days for it. And cooler heads will prevail. Now, the other kind of folks that are resistant toward change, the more, I call them preservationists, because they want to preserve the past. They want a lot of detail. And you need to give them some facts. And then you need to just stop, like Netflix did, and quit giving them facts. Because whatever facts you give them, they'll spend hours stewing on those, and they'll always come back with a counter response.
Okay.
And the counter response is frequently, well, if you would have done this 4 years ago, we wouldn't be in this problem now. You know what? Probably, but nobody was doing that. And there's just, you can't win. You can't get traction. You can't justify yourself enough for people who are analytical by nature, because they're often brilliant and very detailed. And you will die in the fine print.
He's Haydn Shaw. He just dropped some really good gems in there. So let me recap those. Part one, external, is have a plan, say it, and then shut up. And the more times you fiddle with it too, the more negative headlines. As somebody who's done some work in journalism, the more dumb things you do, the more opportunity you give for the media to overreact to it. Internally, my gosh, just say it. Try to have personal meetings so people don't find out things via email. And then if it's somebody that's emotional, you just got to let them be emotional. If they're analytical, you give them a round of facts and then you shut up. But it seemed like in all of these things, there comes a time where you just stop talking about it, which is sort of different than change management for you, where you got to just keep talking about it. In this one, you just got to stop talking about it at some point and let the fire burn itself out.
Clarity. When you're dealing on the negative side of the 6 change reactions, often stop talking is the absolute best thing you can do. And that's kind of one of the distinctions in my approach to change. Most approaches to change are, you need to talk more. And in mine, with a lot of people, you need to talk less.
Hey, he's Haydn Shaw, peopledrivenresults.com. You've got people, you got process issues. They are not getting better. Hanging on to really good employees and attracting good talent is not getting easier. You should check out his stuff. He can help you out. peopledrivenresults.com. My name is Seth Tower Hurd. You got digital stuff going on in your company, or you're ready to grow websites and SEO, social media management, and podcasting. We do that and we make you more money. This is The Consultant.
Or you don't know how to share, if you don't know how to share with people that you're live on Facebook Live, then Seth can help you with that.
Yes.